Hey everyone, welcome to the live cast. Only one this week because we were off on Monday due to the holiday of Yom Kippur. But so we'll try to make this a good and meaty one. I want to dive right in on some news. We talked about Best Buy last week, but Best Buy has been in the news again for their digital transformation excellence. And I really want to mention a few more things about them. The reason I love stories, you might notice that I talk a lot about, we talked about Taco Bell and Target and Best Buy. I love these examples because we all know how awesome Amazon and Facebook and eBay and Uber and, all these types of brands, what we might think of as our pure play digital brands, they tend to be the ones we think of first as doing a fantastic job of adapting to the digital world. They were built for the digital world. But so much of what I do in my life and my career is working with what we call legacy brands, right? Companies that have been around a while, companies that predated the world being so digitally centric. And sometimes, I don't know, sometimes when I'm at these companies, there's a feeling of despair. Will these types of companies actually ever really be able to survive in this world? And so I'm a collector, an avid collector of stories of success, whether it's the New York Times, Federal Express, Disney, Nike, Verizon. There are so many examples of companies that are doing the right things and are figuring out how to make themselves successful for the future. And, one analogy that I like to use sometimes is this idea of digital adolescence. And what I mean by that is, there are companies, as we know, that have been more or less born digital. They were built from the ground up as digitally focused companies. So fine, they started there. But what's happening with most companies today is that they have to go through a digital transformation, right? What does that fundamentally mean? It means the world has changed and they need to change to be relevant to the world that we're in now. And Caitlin, can you mute? And so there we go. Sorry about that. So they need to change to be relevant to the world that they're in today. And that process of transformation can be painful. And I liken it to human transformation, right? We all go through this period in our lives, hopefully almost everybody, where they are, go from being a child to being an adult. And you go through a period of adolescence, years. I happen to be very familiar with this because I guess you could argue, maybe even as many as 4 of my kids are in various stages of adolescence. I have 5 kids and they are 18, 17, 16, 10, and 8. My youngest just turned 8. So let's say he's definitely not an adolescent yet, thank God. But the other 4, starting at 10, man, technically maybe not, but she's starting to become a very young adolescent. And even my 18-year-old, soon to turn 19, is still in the last stages of adolescence. So I got 4 adolescents in my life. And I can tell you that while they're awesome and there's many beautiful things about them, it can be an awkward and challenging and painful time. And when you think about that range that I've got a 10-year-old that's entering adolescence, and I've got an 18-year-old that's still wrapping up her adolescence. That's a long friggin' time to be in adolescence, right? That's 8 years. And I think that a lot of companies have been in that, what I call digital adolescence, for quite a period of time. It's not something you can snap your fingers and do overnight. Believe me, if there were a way to do that, I would do it. And because we work with many of these companies, as many of you know, I've written a book about how to best move yourself through this process, to move yourself through digital transformation as quickly as possible, to get yourself aligned with the world of today as quickly as possible. But let's face it, as quickly as possible means you measure it in years and not decades, right? That's as quickly as possible. I know of no solution that you measure in weeks or months. If someone knows of one, by all means, put in the comments, let me know about it. If there's a magic wand, absolutely, I want to know about it. I'll put it in my next book. But in any case, so I think that's a helpful analogy, because sometimes it can feel when you're an adolescent like you'll never get there. It's an awkward time. In a way, it was easier when you were a child. You were cute, everybody loved you. All of a sudden, you're in adolescence. You're an awkward height. You're still trying to figure out how to behave. You're not quite a kid. You're not quite an adult. And then you look at all these adults that seem to have it all together. And you look back to your earlier innocence as a child, and everything seems better than where you are now. And I think that there's companies that are in this same scenario where they're still in the process of transforming, and that process of transforming can feel awkward. So it's great to find inspiring examples of companies that really, I don't want to say they've completely digitally transformed and they've got no more work to do. Certainly not suggesting that, but where you can really see the fruits of their labor. So Morgan Stanley was particularly praising Best Buy in an article recently I was reading. I think it was on CNN, but they were quoting Morgan Stanley analysts about the fact that the investments that Best Buy has made in their digital platforms over the years have put them in the position of being really one of the leading, most sophisticated digital e-commerce platforms that's out there. That was according to Morgan Stanley's view. And I have to say, as a consumer, I experienced that as well. Not only can you buy products and understand what products are available online and in what stores and search store inventory, but they even have a fantastic method of exposing refurbished or returned inventory. So you can literally see, I do this, I'm a sort of an amateur photographer. And so I often find myself looking at a lens that I'm interested in that's $700-800, and then it'll show me, oh, there's a open box one available at some store that's 20 miles away and it's 25% off or what have you. So they're actually exposing not only all their regular SKUs, but all their refurbished inventory as well. And that's just one example. Another example, of course, is that Best Buy was one of the earliest and sort of most successful at adapting to the whole curbside delivery. We mentioned before that they, already, I'm going to switch to my slide here. I just made one quick slide about it. I think that's the right button to push. Yeah, okay, why not? But we mentioned before how they were saying that during COVID, over half their orders were e-commerce. And but here's a couple of some of their financials that have just come out, or at least I just were exposed to them. As a result of everything, first of all, let me say, Best Buy closed 1,000 stores, pretty much all their stores in the United States. And of course, many stores were forced to close. Best Buy, of course, also had many stores that were forced to close. But in many areas, their stores were considered essential services. I'm not honestly sure why, exactly the designation that makes a Best Buy store an essential service. But in any case, maybe because people needed technology for work from home and those types of things. But in any case, they, despite having the legal ability to still remain open, because they were considered essential service, they largely made the decision to close their stores, presumably for the well-being and safety of their employees and their customers. And so, but that decision obviously is also potentially costly. It's one thing if you're forced to do it. It's another thing if you do it optionally. So that takes more courage. And but they have done a fantastic job, as I mentioned, of both the general online e-commerce as well as the online in terms of order online, pick up in the store. So let's just look at a couple of numbers in the news. So first of all, March and April, when the pandemic really first took off, Best Buy's sales were down, but they were still at 81% of their sales year over year compared to the same period in the prior year in 2019. And believe me, I know many businesses that would kill. I mean, who would have thought, right, that we're in this world, but that would kill to have stats that are 81% of the sales in 2020 for the same period over 2019. So that already was impressive. Then in May, June, and July, they're actually up. Best Buy is actually up compared to 2019 by 5.8%. Now, of course, you could say, well, they were in the right place at the right time because, of course, people having to adapt and work from home. No doubt people wanted to invest more in work from home, office technology. So there's probably, sales increases there. People are spending more time at home. So entertainment technologies become even more important. They're not going on vacation. They're going to buy a bigger flat screen TV, perhaps. And furthermore, people were spending more time cooking at home. And, Best Buy also sells a fair number of kind of kitchen appliance type products. I know we got our last refrigerator from a Best Buy. So, so there's some, advantages that they have as a result of COVID in terms of increased sales. But then again, remember that this is a business that is classically a big box retailer, very, very traditionally dependent on the in-store sales experience. So I still give them huge credit for making that transformation and being in a position to take advantage of the opportunities present in COVID. And I say opportunities, I don't mean it in a opportunistic way. They're there to serve all of us when we have the needs that fall within the domain that they operate in, within electronics and appliances and whatnot, and cables and adapters, and they found a way to make sure that they continue to serve people during this period of time. So appreciation to them and congratulations for their success. And they were also congratulated by the market. Their stock has gained 26% this year, a greater gain. And of course, as we know, there are a number of brands of course, Amazon being an amazing example that whose share prices have gone up as a result of their increased sales due to COVID. Certainly Walmart and Home Depot and Costco and Target is on the slide. But Best Buy's increase was, well, it says here, this is from the article on CNN, outpaces at least Walmart, Target, and Costco. So perhaps not Home Depot and Amazon, but nevertheless, a fantastic year, fantastic leadership of that company, and clear leadership that didn't just start during COVID, but started years and years ago as they established the e-commerce platforms that were strong enough. They had the foresight to do that, so that I'm sure they didn't do it primarily because they thought there was going to be a pandemic. None of us thought that. But of course, having that kind of technology, digital transformation, puts you in a position to be agile and flexible and nimble and deal with what may come. And clearly that was a huge asset to them in this time. So anyway, I think that's a wonderful example. Congratulations to Best Buy. And let us not forget that it was only a few years ago that their number one competitor, Circuit City, even before all the economic pressures of COVID, was not able to weather the digital world where so many people were buying their electronic devices in other ways, right? Through Amazon or other online retailers, or telecommunications companies like Verizon, and so obviously they went out of business. So here's a company that's weathered that and is now really beautifully weathering coronavirus. And I think that a lot of credit to their leadership, but also no doubt credit to their successful digital transformation. So that's what I wanted to say about Best Buy. And if you have any thoughts or comments about that, and before I get on to my next topic here, my main topic of the day, man, I got to get something to hold that behind me so that wire is not always in the way. Anyway, so then the main topic I want to talk about today is another viewer question. So many of you know, a couple weeks ago, we spent an entire session talking about a question that we got from one of you, and we're going to do it again. I got a great question from somebody on LinkedIn, and the question was, where does data fit in to the process of developing a great customer experience? Where is it something you focus on early in the process in terms of leveraging data, or is it more something later in the process? The question was, I don't have the actual question in front of me. Actually, I have it somewhere. But anyway, the essence of the question was, where is the right place to apply data in the process of building a great customer experience? So that is a great question. And I actually have a couple of thoughts about that. So let me dive in, and let me switch back to my slides here. 1 second. Hello, slides. Please move forward. There we go. So first of all, data is very helpful just in the process of trying to persuade people to begin the process of digital transformation, because very often that requires convincing. And there's a lot of stats, and actually we publish stats. There's stats in my book on this, and along with the book, which is coming out shortly, we're also offering something called Digital Stats Quarterly, which is going to be a place you can go and get updated stats like these stats that we've sourced from different places. But for example, this one from the Aberdeen Group, over 20% of companies, as measured by their quality of digital customer experience, enjoy an average increase in revenue of 35% compared to 7.7% average for the rest. So in other words, using data that has been analyzed across companies to demonstrate that having a great customer experience pays off. And in this case, it's showing that the companies that have the best digital experience seem to be earning more revenue. And similarly, there's another stat down there that says, according to an MIT study, what they consider to be digitally advanced. Every study tends to use a little different method, a little different terminology. So you have to sort of piece them together. And of course, naturally, therefore, they don't come up with exactly the same numbers. But that's okay, because you don't need to, whether it's 9% or 12%, or, the main point is the aggregate message, which is, generally speaking, the companies that deliver a better digital customer experience are earning more revenue. And as we just talked about with Best Buy, right? I mean, is it a surprise that's such a priority for customers today? It doesn't mean you can't earn any money if you don't have a good customer experience, because sometimes, you're the Radio Shack on the corner where the person happens to be, and they need to go buy something, and they will. But if they have a choice, when they have a choice, very often customer experience is a huge part of it. And then, similarly, you can use data to demonstrate that it's not only about revenue, because sometimes someone says, well, sure, we might earn more revenue, but how much is it going to cost, right? In any business, it's not really about revenue. Usually, it's usually about profit. So, if I spend $1 million and I increase my revenue $100,000, that is an increase in revenue, but it's not necessarily worth it, right? I better keep that $1 million in my pocket. So other studies have shown that companies with strong customer experience have better profit margins despite the investment. So even after they have to pay off the depreciation on their capital investments. And just a few bullet points here. I'm going to make this a little bigger for you guys. I think if I do this, it will be bigger. Yeah. Wow. Isn't that cool? Harvard Business School found that the average profit for companies that have a digitally centric customer experience was 5% more than, and I believe that was 5 percentage points more, meaning like from 15 to 20% profit margin. A different study by MIT, just down the road from Harvard, concluded that similar idea, digitally mature companies are 26% more profitable, which I think is a similar finding, right? In other words, if your profit is 15% and then it goes to 18 or 19%, that's 26% more profitable, right? And then there's another one from KPMG. So I won't read every stat to you, but the point is, to the question of how to use data in customer experience, the first place you can use it is up front when you're just trying to build a case. That's not the only place you can use it, but that's certainly one place. So now beyond that, I'm sorry. Let me share this as well. Another slide. Hang on, I'll pull this up for you. It's also true for some CEOs, revenue and profit aren't even the most important thing. If you had to pick one measure for many companies, it's just stock price, it's valuation. Now, of course, if you earn more profit, that generally does lead to a higher valuation in most cases. But nevertheless, beyond valuation, several studies have shown that digitally driven companies that have outstanding digital experiences, also have higher valuations overall, which of course aligns to the profitability, but can be other things as well. So according to MIT, more digitally mature companies achieve market valuations 12% higher than their competitors. I think on the last slide, they said that the profit was only like 5% higher, but 4% higher. I'm gonna try to go back here. MIT said, oh, well, it's a little confusing, 26%. But in any case, but here they're saying the actual value of the company's higher as well. And the Forrester does their CX index, and they've indicated that the companies that score at the top of their CX index, who are the leaders in digital customer experience, they're growing by 30% more in terms of valuation than the other brands, lagging brands, as they say. And I think that's comparing the top to the bottom, not the top to everybody else. Nevertheless, though, here are multiple data points that all are kind of making the point. And by the way, if you sign up for any of our mailing lists, we send out periodic updates to these kind of statistics because, of course, there's new stats coming out all the time, and we are big collectors of them. If you want to read the whole reports for some of these stats, you wind up having to pay Forrester or Gartner or whoever else, and you should do that because they're fantastic. But the highest level stats, some of the key findings, we just gather those and we send those out by email. So one way to get those is just to sign up for a copy of the free chapter of the book, or any of our email places you can sign up. But that's one way to get a free chapter of Winning Digital Customers. And in addition to getting that immediately, we will be periodically sending out updated stats. So anyway, having those kinds of stats is certainly one great way that I don't necessarily think this is probably the main way that that person who asked that question was meaning when he said how to use data in customer experience. He probably meant how to use it to actually drive a specific customer experience. And I'm going to get to that. But oh yeah, got to put a picture of my book in. So now I've done it. Okay. But let's just talk about how we use data in another way. So as we're thinking about conceiving and building out a digital customer experience, one of the things we always think about, and this is something from the book, which is this idea of the customer experience value chain, right? And all it's really saying here is, if what you really care about in the end are your business results at the very top there, increasing your share price, reducing cost, increasing revenue. Well, how do you get that? Well, you get that by driving customer behaviors, at least mostly. Most business results are a result of customer behaviors. Customers buying more, customers being more loyal, customers not creating cost for you because they're using self-service channels and not calling your call center. Possibly customers posting about, helping promote you, referring people to you, customers renewing, customers, buying supplies from you, whatever it may be. So the customer behavior is the key to driving successful business results. And then how do you get customer behaviors that you want? Well, it's usually through driving mindsets. By the thoughts and feelings you engender in people. This is what advertising is all about, of course, giving you an idea in your mind that's going to lead to behavior. But it's also what a lot of customer experience is about. When you go to a restaurant, you have a fantastic experience. That's going to give you memories, thoughts, feelings. That's going to lead you to future behavior of going back to that restaurant. And then to that same point, where do we get these thoughts and feelings from? The bottom of this diagram is simply saying from experiences. whether it's the experience of watching a TV ad, or it's an experience of dining in a restaurant, or an experience of buying a product and using it. I love my Sony a7R4 DSLR camera. Sorry, it's not a DSLR camera. It's a mirrorless camera, Sony a7R4 camera. Amazing focus, amazing background blur. I have a fantastic experience with that. So when I'm thinking about, I'm not going to buy a new one for a long time. That one's relatively new. But if I was going to buy another camera and I continue to have a great experience, I'm probably going to be looking for the Sony a7R11, or whatever. So experiences lead to mindsets, mindsets leads to behaviors, and behavior leads to business results. So what does all that have to do with data? Well, where does data fit into all this? Well, first of all, we can use data to help us figure out what we should be doing in terms of the customer experiences. Things like going out and measuring, evaluating customers and studying the ways in which they use products today, our products and competitors' products, and using that data to help us craft the touch points that we think will work the best. And of course, that's when the whole process is done, that's going to lead us to data at the top, right? Something like cost, revenue, share price, number of sales online, the data we were talking about with Best Buy, right? The share price is up, the year-over-year sales are up. That's data, right? So part of what we want to look at from data is the very end result. That's data, right? What kind of sales, what kind of revenue, et cetera, am I getting in the end? So, and then in the middle, you can also use various metrics to try to understand, well, what are the mindsets? You can do a brand impact study. You can survey customers. You can use tools that look at customer sentiment to try to understand how are the experiences leading to specific thoughts and feelings. And then, of course, you can measure behavior, right? There are many types of customer behaviors that we're measuring and generating data from: number of times they click on our ad, number of times they visit a website, the pages on the website that they look at, whether they buy, whether they return, looking at different segments, how their behaviors differ, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So we have really data every step of the process. And I just wanted to maybe slice this one more way before we sign out for today, which is that's kind of when we think about the value chain. But I just wanted to look at it one more time. If we think about the customer experience process. So if we think about, conceptualization, right? What should the experience be? We're going to create a shopping app. What features does it need? What kind of brand should it have? Where should it be marketed? What languages should be available in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, how do we support that? There's all kinds of data. We can do ethnography, surveys, customer segmentation. We can buy data to understand how different types of customer segments are behaving in the market today. We can use social listening to understand what people are saying about things, perhaps to understand where points of pain are. If we're entering the market with a new product and we know we're going to be competing with Uber, what are people saying about what do they like least about Uber? Where's an opportunity to create something that is, capitalizing on the downsides or points of pain in customers using Uber or Lyft or any other competitor that you're looking to compete with? So that's the CX conceptualization use of data. And then let's talk about the design. So once you've kind of conceived, well, this is what I want to build, now you actually build the exact design, the final specifications. Prototype testing is a fantastic way of using data there. So you're going to build out like an Envision prototype or an iRise prototype or something that you're going to put in hands of users, and you can see, do they really use it? How do they move through it? Where do they hit problems? So that you can continue to refine it. So that type of data is hugely valuable in the process of doing a CX design. And then lastly, once you put the actual thing live, you have a website, you have an app, you have a virtual reality experience, you have an Alexa skill, whatever it may be, a chatbot. Of course, you want to be gathering data, right? Clearly, once the thing is live, really the process of making it great has only begun. Key concept of lean manufacturing, and as it's applied now very often in digital product development, is to put out the minimum viable product, get it in the hands of users as quickly as possible and as inexpensively as possible, because the best way to learn is always going to be, the data of real users really using your product. So the sooner you can get something out there, and then of course you have all these different types of data that you can use. Are they clicking? Are they opening it? Are they deleting your app? Are they downloading it? And depending on what type of app it is, of course, there's going to be all kinds of different data. If it's a social app, are they posting? Are they watching videos? How much are they watching? If it's products, are they buying? Are they returning? Are they posting reviews? If so, what do the reviews say? Are people complaining? Are they calling the call center? Are they having problems? And on and on and on and on. So the summary answer, I could have probably been more succinct with all this and just said, where do you use data? Everywhere. But of course, that's kind of vague. So I wanted to give you guys a little more specificity. I think there's so many opportunities. And as we know, the companies that are most successful today, one of the characteristics we see is their excellence at using data. And, part of the point I wanted to make here too is data just doesn't mean Excel spreadsheets. There's lots of different types of data. And it's not always, it can be, a data like Google Analytics data, but it can also be, we watched 10 users use our app and we gathered a log of key insights and problems that they encountered. That's data too. And so there's a lot of different ways of gathering data, a lot of ways of analyzing data, and huge numbers of opportunities of applying data to improve your customer experience and generate better business results. So thank you for the question. And once again, proving the point that if you send in questions, and I know we've received some other questions we have not answered. So be patient. We will try to answer them if they're relevant. I got a couple questions. I'm like, why are you asking me that question? I don't know the answer to that question. If you sent me one of those questions, I responded to you. And I was like, gosh, I don't know. So send us questions about something to do with digital product innovation, change, organizational change, enterprise innovation, digital transformation. These are the things I know about. I do not know, for example, about the technology, the best technology to use for your data warehouse. You got the wrong guy for that. In any case, thanks for watching. Hopefully this has been useful. Hopefully we've packed a little more into this one episode since it's our only episode of the week due to the holiday. Next week, we'll be back as usual on Mondays and Wednesdays. Send us your questions, and I look forward to seeing you then.